Hello and welcome to our Celtic Frost retrospective. If you've been paying attention to our site, you'll see that there have been 4 parts before, all done by David here. And this is going to be the final part that encapsulates everything. So thanks for joining me today, David.
Pleasure.
So let's start with, the first EP, which might as well be an album considering how influential it is, Morbid Tales. Initial thoughts?
My first impression was that this still had this Hellhammer energy as compared to what comes later in Celtic Frost, but at the same time it's a lot more defined. Like it has edges, something that Hellhammer didn't have, which was part of how what makes Hellhammer fun. And there's still some experimentation here that is missing from mid-period Celtic Frost. For instance, there's like a weird ambient song in here.
Yeah, Don't Smack Up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great,
and it's
great
quite
song.
Good.
Yeah,
very good. Yeah. What about you? What did you hear in it that stood out?
This for me, I didn't hear it like that before, but now I listen to it, like this is the perfection of what Hellhammer did. Sure, you lose the kind of crazy over the top parts of Hellhammer, that made it so wild and so interesting. But songwriting wise, like this is that style taken to its logical limits, without going deeper, like they did later on To Mega Therion. But this one's really interesting. You take a song like Procreation of the Wicked. It's very simple. It still has all the kind of, insanity, but it's looking towards something greater. It's very epic in scope, and it's only 4 minutes long, which makes it even crazier at how well developed it is.
Right. And this makes me think that Tom G. Warrior and company, they're probably so experiment oriented that their best albums are these transition albums between projects, because to me this is one of the most interesting Celtic Frost album, along with Monotheist. And Monotheist already doesn't sound like Celtic Frost. It starts something like Triptychon. It's another kind of exploration.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can also agree at this point, there is no debate. This is fully formed extreme metal. Like from this point on, the base has been completely solidified. Where with Hellhammer is still a little more abstract, can go into many other ways. Here you have the style that's obviously, the base for Dark Throne, Ablaze in the Northern Sky takes so much from this EP.
Yeah, and what I find very interesting here is that it's as we've said before, it's not really death metal and it's not really black metal. It's what you call the extreme metal, right? It's already past thrash metal, but you can't really box it. And this leads me to another point, that I think that when bands are really experimenting, progressing within the metal evolution, they stop. It's very hard to box them, and this happens with Burzum to a certain degree, where when Burzum first made it, something like Hevis Lisset Dar Os, the 1994 album with the 4 songs, right? I believe that when it came out at that time, nothing else sounded like that. They weren't playing the black metal that anybody else was playing. They were doing he was doing something else, and I think this is something like that too. What do you make of that? Of this on box that you can't really place it in one box?
Yeah, definitely. You also, this is a doom metal, very different to what the trad doom stuff was, but it's a completely different take on it as well. So it's coming from all these different angles. It's everything has been taken. And what I mean by taken, not even inspired. I mean taken one-to-one. Ideas have been literally segments of the song have been lifted out into other bands. and there is so much that could be done, just by changing the aesthetics, because, Obituary's career, what is Obituary? Celtic Frost with some of the hardcore they grew up with, right? Dark Throne is pretty much the same thing, but from maybe a more heavy metal perspective. And they branch out so much, despite both these bands being so indebted to this record. Because there's so much that could be done. There are so many ways, you listen to the arrangements of the songs, like, sure, the riffs are simple once again, everything is very minimalistic, but because of the way it's written, it could branch out into any way. I'm always surprised when I hear these songs. You never get tired of them because there's always something there to offer. Something like, maybe they could have gone, oh, wait, they're going back this way. Oh, okay, I see.
And I feel that from Morbid Tales to Mega Therion, there is they develop this even more. Like, they have new songs in To Mega Therion that are even more. They're more epic. Even they're able to do what you said about taking the songs somewhere else. Yet at the same time, you can feel that that's the limit of this style in a way.
Yeah, well, I think Morbid Tales was definitely a precursor to Mega Therion, because I honestly believe what you said. Even the band know this because they never tried to copy To Mega Therion ever again. Because it was literally that idea pushed to the limit.
I don't know which one of the guys in the band. We always talk about Tom G. Warrior because he seems like such a character. But as far as I understand, the bassist, Ain, I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Martin Eric Lane, yeah.
As far as I understand, he's the one that really had the more experimental ideas, the high vocals behind the Tom G. Warrior's more gruffy delivery, and other things like this. I think the timpani on To Mega Therion, the orchestral percussion, I think that was his idea, but I'm not completely sure.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, his arrival into, already into Hellhammer was a huge shift for the band. So I wouldn't be surprised if that carried on throughout Celtic Frost's career.
Into the Pandemonium, it's like it's a very, when we go from To Mega Therion to Into the Pandemonium, I think that's a very divisive album. Like, some people really like it, and then some other people hate it completely. And I made the case in the article I wrote for the website that this is Into the Pandemonium shows that these guys don't like to stay still. You also mentioned that in one of our previous podcasts, that none of the Celtic Frost albums sound the same. They're all something different. They're never static.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of one of the advantages of having such simple riffs, relatively simple song structures, is that they've always had the kind of same ingredients to their music. It's never been a huge change when you look at what the guitar's doing. It's always been centered around very simple chromatic riffs, on the limited part of the guitar neck. But what's impressive is just how much they do of that, and how much they mix up those ingredients together to make different things, and what they choose to emphasize on different albums.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
in a way, I think it's a bit like wasted potential, because it's like this Tom G. Warrior, or whoever really is making this riff, I'm assuming it's really him on the guitar completely, entirely. He has his own style, but he will just kind of go from flower to flower, let's say. Yeah. Like pollinating here, pollinating there, but he never deepens entirely. He never goes deep inside any of these ideas. Like the idea in Morbid Tales, that particular very savage take of Celtic Frost. Could have gone on. He could have explored. You talk about being located in a certain part of the guitar neck, and that's true. He could have made another album in which he explored more of and he did in To Mega Therion. Actually, there's a bit more there are more higher notes slightly in the riffs themselves, as far as I can remember, but it's there's still room to do something else, and they never did. He just kept advancing into other weird or very different niches, Into the Pandemonium, Cold Lake, Vanity. Each one of them is like almost on a different, with one foot on a different genre.
Yeah. But then again, he never needed to explore more of that part, because so many of the bands did that. True. When you look at pretty much every single black or death metal band is inspired by Celtic Frost. You even have gothic metal bands, a huge influence on doom metal. This was, in many ways, Celtic Frost is just as important as Slayer to the development of metal in general.
Talking about hardcore, probably bands being influenced by early Celtic Frost, as far as he could hear.
Definitely.
But and I was listening to very, very, very early Dark Throne and the demos. I'm talking 1987, 1988, right? When they're still playing death metal. But on those really early, there's a very primitive kind of death metal, but it is death metal. It's not thrash metal. But it's something that you can imagine coming right out of Morbid Tales. It's not even Hellhammer. It's more grounded than Hellhammer. I don't know if you've listened to those demos before.
Yeah, I've heard them a long time ago. Very much in the shadow of their influences back then.
What about Burzum? Do you think Burzum had any influence from Celtic Frost? It doesn't sound too much like that, but
it would have been there, I think. But then again, the thing with Burzum is that he's such a contrarian. He had to escape everyone around him. You look at his top 10 list of metal albums. 4 Iron Maiden ones. I don't think he's completely sincere in what he says.
I think so.
You know what I mean? I think that there's a lot of him being a contrarian, but I think definitely his early stuff was very inspired by Celtic Frost.
Yeah, I felt that that he was inspired on Candlemas, early Candlemas.
Yes,
that was my.
Ooh,
feels like that sometimes. The other thing is that Burzum likes to experiment a lot too, so he does escape those things. I wonder if this is the same thing that happens with Celtic Frost, that they might be contrarians too, except that they lost their edge towards Into the Pandemonium and Cold Lake.
Yeah, but I can understand them, because in many ways, To Mega Therion, it is the absolute summit of that style. Every single thing is perfect. The production, fantastic. The playing, tight as ever. There's an increased rhythmic edge, and the lyrics, my God, this guy's not a native English speaker. I think he read a few books, obviously the Conan books and all that stuff, but some of the lines he comes up with, I'm gonna have to say one of my favorite songs, which I consider really a 11 out of 10 metal song, has to be Circle of the Tyrants, right? Where everything is so tied in together. This is his aesthetic, his worldview at its summit. It's about the idea that wars and glory are only ephemeral. They disappear quickly. It doesn't really matter. It's it's an intelligent take on the kind of anti-war stuff that was really popular at the time, with especially the thrash metal bands. Metallica had God knows how many songs, etc. But the way it combines it with his own imagination, and then this is where the song really reaches a huge climax. I mean, that final riff on Circle of the Tyrants because it's played before. There's a little solo, a little kind of interlude, like they like to do in a lot of opera, a little interlude, then back to the main part. And here they do it, and it's just incredible how that song flows together and how it's this powerful climax that just finishes it. Even necromantical screams with the beautiful vocals at the end. This is where they really, first time they get the female singer to help them. So this is really like, in terms of an artistic vision, this is complete as it can be.
That's true. It's very tight, very well put together. Everything.
Everything.
Did you notice that they really have an act for putting slow parts and fast parts within the same song? So you don't have fast songs and slow songs. All the songs flow between fast and slow, and it doesn't feel awkward. It doesn't feel forced. It's not slow part and fast part. It's just the development of the song.
Yes, definitely. There's one thing I noticed that they do, that Morbid Angel made a career out of, is that when they increase the tempo here, they'll tend to to play notes with longer note durations, right? So the tempo feels faster, the drums are going faster, but the guitar feels like it's almost going slower. It's kind of very warped thing that they do very well. Yeah,
I remember making that observation when I was analyzing the Red in the Sky Is Ours a lot, when I was paying a lot of attention to what was going on. And it's true, and I guess it's just good compositional practice. Yeah. If everything's going really fast, try to make the notes a little bit longer so they can be heard.
Yeah.
And then when the music's going slower, well, just balancing everything out, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it really leaves room for the drums, because this is on To Mega Therion, this is when they got Reed St. Mark, who was very, very important, because he added a lot of the kind of weird percussions, the weird sound effects, the timpani, everything.
Him then. Okay. Oh yeah, it's him.
Yeah,
he came up with the idea.
Yeah, I think he was the perfect member to complete the other two. And then the way he's able to kind of dictate the pace of the songs.
Yeah.
And how could I forget? Like, I think this is where a lot of bands like Asphyx, and a lot of the kind of general European doom death bands, really took the kind of slow, powerful power chord kind of dirge from this band, because there are times where it's just playing a bunch of power chords very slowly, but with so much weight. Every single note is given a huge amount of importance. Something. Just like one power chord every bar. Dum dum.
But then he'll as a drummer he'll make something out of it, and he makes the song a lot better. You're right, and it's even more creative than Morbid. I mean, it is an upgrade from Morbid Tales for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Because of these things you mentioned, you hear a lot of like you said, one power chord per bar, but you hear the drums doing different fills, and it really adds to your experience.
It's the opposite of incantation, where they're playing around the beat. Now this is, everything's on the beat. This is majestic. It's a very typical 4/4 military march. This is going to battle. Fantastic. And the lyrics here are incredible. His ability as a lyric writer here is just on another level.
You talk about this drummer, Reed St. Mark, and he came in To Mega Therion, and he was Into the Pandemonium. But but he wasn't in like Cold Lake and the two albums after Nemesis and Vanity. He wasn't in them. The same with the bass player. It was different. It was just Tom G. Warrior going forward with other musicians there. Oof. And it tells you a lot about the contribution of the drummers and the drummer and the bass player in the previous albums, as you said. there were other bands then later taking from this drumming approach, right?
Yeah.
But off the top of our heads, we just think about Tom G. Warrior, and I feel like it happens a lot in art that we end up focusing on these personalities, while the contribution to the evolution of the genre is bit by different people. Because if you look at what else he did, apparently this drummer was in a band called Mindfunk afterwards. What is that? That did some things in 1991. That's all. And then he was in Triptychon in 2008 for a bit, and that's it. But what he did with To Mega in Celtic Frost had a huge influence over a whole genre, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge contribution.
You know,
but
it's
he
like,
didn't get rich.
It's a shame. But you know what they say? It's like a flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long. And I think his flame was very, very intense on the early Celtic Frost. So it was going to last forever. But yeah, I mean, now we're done with the big classics. Let's move on to Into the Pandemonium.
Into the Pandemonium. It's my take on it. We start with the most insulting song that Celtic Frost ever made, and that was the Mexican radio. What the hell is this? It's, oh my god, it's cringy. It's, oh no. And the drummer's still the same, and the bass player's still the same. It's them. It's all them. So you have to wonder what was going on here. A lot of the riffs in this album are very good. Not Mexican radio, but later on, afterwards, you find some really good riffs and some interesting ambient tracks, explorations, I'd say. But the album doesn't come together really.
Yeah, no, I mean, Inner Sanctum has some fantastic moments that feel almost like in the same vein as To Mega Therion. But there's some parts where it's just absolutely insane. Like Oriental Masquerade is literally the band, I've trying to beg someone, hey, can we please write a soundtrack for Arabian Nights or something stupid?
I mean, here we concentrate on the music, so it's hard to start to speculate on why this happened, right? I think that's what we need Mac for. He's always like big on the whole, but yeah, the point is that they throw a lot of ideas at the wall, and many of them are individually interesting. A lot of the riffs are very, very good. Some of the more varied as well compared to what they did before. But yeah, I think I wrote about this album recently, and my take was that they probably thought correctly that they were not going to top To Mega Therion. They certainly were not going to go deeper than To Mega Therion. But they said, okay, let's write a first song in this album that tells everyone this is not gonna be the same thing. And then, if you go past Mexican radio, the rest of the album is acceptable because Mexican radio is so ridiculous and so cringy. I don't even know what.
It's not their worst song, though. There's one that's worse. Because this one apparently is a cover. It's a cover of a 70s rock band. I thought it was them for some reason.
I also thought it was them, but apparently I just saw that it was. It shows how much.
But this was that, I don't know what the hell was going on, but I think the story of what happened around this album in many ways is more interesting than this album, because starting an album off with a weird cover.
But it's like, well, it's not the same. You mentioned that Obituary made a whole career out of Celtic Frost plus hardcore, I think, crossover. And in their best album, Cause of Death, Obituary put Circle of the Tyrants. I think it's the third track or the second track in the album. And it's a cover of it. It's an incredible cover of Circle of the Tyrants.
I mean, they had so much passion playing that song, but they were still true to their style there.
Right.
So it's one of those rare things. I think, most covers always feel like, oh, I'm gonna listen to 30 seconds of Vader covering Depeche Mode and Mayhem, out of curiosity.
Yeah.
But most of the times, covers don't really make any sense outside of that. It's just a fun curiosity. There are 10 million mediocre death metal bands who've covered Slayer, and it just sounds like mediocre shit. But I honestly do believe that the Circle of the Tyrants cover is fantastic.
No, yeah, it's great. They made it their own. They played it faster, in a deeper, in a lower tuning, I think.
No, not even. I think they were tuned to the same thing. Maybe D, but no lower than D. I think they were E flat on this album.
But it is faster, right? It's faster, and it has an incredible solo by a guy who filled that album with solos.
Oh, James Murphy, death metal's mercenary. Yeah, fantastic play. He enriched so many albums. I mean, we could do an entire episode on how many albums he saved and elevated, because his career was insane.
We should probably at some point program it. So you're not very familiar. I mean, that's why we need someone who's into the album to pick up the secrets from it, because if you look at it from afar as a whole, it fails completely. Right? It doesn't even. I listened to it a few times and I enjoyed moments in it, but it doesn't stick. Really, it's just Into the Pandemonium, and you look at the cover, and it's a city in flames. It's really like the breaking apart of an empire, like Babylon falling, like our Western society not knowing what to do with itself. And the song sounds like that. The collection of ideas in this album.
Yeah, maybe they didn't have time, because they did break up right after that. Pretty much right after it for a while. For 6 months.
Sign a contract.
Yeah. But I think I know what they were trying to do, and I think there are some great moments. But everything this album wanted to be was done infinitely better on Monotheist. So what the hell on earth is Cold Lake? Like, what happened?
Let's look at the fact that the only surviving member here is Tom G. Warrior. And it feels like a cringy sellout move. Really cringy, because, I mean, Celtic Frost is such an underground band coming as it does from Hellhammer and being so weird and using H.R. Giger's art. And then in Cold Lake, it sounds like they're trying to be a glam metal band. You even watch some of the videos of him from this era, and we think, what is this guy doing? Like when you had Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses in that, or you had the guys from Motley Crue. These were guys that when they were young, with their long blonde hair and their handsome boy features. But this guy's ugly, right? This guy's ugly and sounds horrible. So what is he doing? Maybe it's an identity crisis.
It's so weird because, glam, when, glam's at its best, it has very simple yet very infectious melodies. It's kind of supposed to be pop meets 80s extravagance. It's a consumer society gone mad. It's supposed to be the biggest thing. It's, you have the moments where the light is out, the chorus that comes, the big drum solos, the flashiness. There was an amount of technical skill involved to make all of that. Even guys like Bon Jovi had some insanely talented musicians.
Yes.
Bands like Toto, 80s pop was on a completely different level. And, we're talking about a guy, he's trying to figure out a way to make Celtic Frost work within those parameters where it's you know, he's completely unsuited for it. He can't sing here for this.
Yes.
He doesn't know how to write a good pop melody. You know, it's like a fish trying to climb a tree. You know,
That's a very good picture.
you know. But what really disgusts me the most on this album is that when he does try to play a lot more Celtic Frosty stuff, it sounds like a thrash metal band covering Celtic Frost. Like, that's what annoys me. It just reminds me of a lot of you know, D-tiered thrash metal from that time period. You know, just a very simple, you know, kind of dumb riffs from that time.
Yes, yes.
And he's trying to sing behind it, dude, like about seduced for a kiss, cherry orchards.
Oh, yes.
You know, when he tries to be this kind of like the womanizer, you know, a Casanova, it's
Yeah, it
it's not who he
doesn't.
is.
I mean, and even if he was, because he was probably, as I understand, he did fuck around a lot, but to fuck around a lot is not the same as being the smooth Casanova. It's a
Yeah,
very different things, right? And this thing where in Hellhammer you see him at his most creative, right?
yeah,
And then here he's trying to fit in, and it really reminds me of the thing that artists in art, well, maybe in everything, but in art in particular, you really have to do what comes easily to you, and he is really good with screaming
yeah,
original uh, pavement riffs, right? He's
yeah.
really good with that, and here he's trying to put
Like,
himself into a mainstream box.
yeah, and you know what's even more disgusting? I don't think there's a single ooh on this album. Like, this is to what extent he's lost it here.
Yeah, he's even trying to sing
Yeah,
normally, right? He sounds horrible. It's. I mean, I felt pain listening to this album because I cringe at every song. Uh-huh. Let me see. So that I think that's all we have to say about Cold Lake, right? I don't know. You know what the funny thing is that I think I like the title Cherry Orchards. It's a good title, Juices Like Wine, but not for this, not for
yeah.
Celtic Frost. Like I would read like a female written erotica that's called Cherry Orchards, you know, like a really twisted one. But not a Celtic Frost song. It's ridiculous.
Jesus Christ.
Sounds to me. Because
Yeah.
he's trying to be like Little Velvet, Blood on Kisses, Downtown. This sounds like gothy erotica. You know, Sleazy Roses Without Thorns.
Jesus Christ. Oh, this was bad. But you know
And
what?
as you say, he's not a bad lyricist. Like you read the lyrics, and as long as it wasn't him doing this, it would be okay, I suppose. Uh-huh.
Yeah, oof. But you know, as bad as this one is, I think the follow-up, you know, Vanity Nemesis is even worse.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because you know, this is really
You know, one interesting thing about the lineup thing is that for Vanity Nemesis, Martik Eric Ain came back into the band. So that's why I suppose it sounds more like metal. We talked about it being really mediocre, right?
yeah.
And like even worse than mediocre, as you said. But it sounds like heavier again. And I think it's probably because of this guy coming back.
Mm. Well, it's funny, you know, Martin Ain actually assisted in the songwriting, and he rejoined halfway through the recording process to complete the band. Like, that's why he's in the photo shoot. He was not there from the beginning. But yeah, but you know, this is really what I hate a lot about that kind of that like when the 90s came around in metal and everyone discovered groove and Pantera. And while some bands were able to kind of get away with it and, you know, to have really inoffensive albums, you know,
Yeah.
just kind of like simple, you know, chug chug, yay, everyone's mad, I hate my stepdad kind of music. Celtic Frost are completely lost here. You know, there's none of the angst that is so essential for this music to work. They're way too old to be acting like teenagers here, probably way too mature as well. And it's just, you know, this is where I really see them as like boomers trying to keep up with the young kids.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, because this guy by this album, he was already 34, 33 years old. Yeah, he can't be singing about yeah, phallic tantrum, a kiss or a whisper. Come on.
yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I think was it? Yeah, you know, the Nemesis main song. Like, this is where some things are interesting when they get out of the metal mold, and you know they can play around with, you know, softer parts. You know, remove the distortion. They start to have the kind of good ideas that really started to show during Into the Pandemonium here, when they really allow themselves to escape metal for brief moments throughout this album. But, you know, ultimately, this is like this is pretty much Into the Pandemonium with just new metal, and like the experimentation really pushed aside as much as they could.
People don't get why new metal is essentially bad. And they confuse it with, oh, I enjoy it, so they must be doing something good. Well, it's just because you're not listening closely enough, because what's happening here is that it's dumbed down from what Celtic Frost was doing before. Yeah. Right? And it's only good when it starts to escape those confines. Exactly. Which of the songs you said Nemesis, the title track?
Yeah, Nemesis has pretty good ideas on it. Quite honestly, it's a very, very difficult album to remember. You know, if you're familiar with kind of like Overkill's groove stuff, you know, even fucking like Exodus were going to shit during that time. You know, not saying Testament, you know, all these kind of very
standard,
yeah, simple-minded thrash metal bands were drawn towards this sound. Like, this really feels that kind of that pre-nu metal era where everything was going towards groove. You know, even Anthrax, you know, as dumb as they are, were like trying to capture that sound.
I think this guy, it's a matter of knowing your place. And I may sound very arrogant saying that, because obviously these guys are legends, but yeah, I mean, the reason why they're so original, imagine, if you will, Varg Vikernes trying to play in mainstream. It would probably be horrible as well. Yeah. But he never tried. He's arrogant enough and he's contrarian enough that he'll never try. He'll ever only do whatever pleases him, and that's why everything he touches is good.
Yeah,
to a certain degree. Sometimes better than others, but in here, these guys are carried away. Well, not this guy. It's probably just Tom G. Warrior. So
yeah. This was a very, very weird period, and you know, I think there's a certain amount of irony towards this, you know, because when you look at the kind of the EPs, the demos, or whatever they had in between, right? So you have the Prototype demo, right? And Prototype features one song called Hip Hop Jugend, where he's rapping in German. And you know, obviously,
did not listen to that.
He is taking the absolute piss. But I think, you know, I don't know, you know, it's at this point, you know, where there isn't the kind of passion, sincerity, and even the vulnerability, because, you know, you're putting all your best ideas out there to be criticized by everyone, and they were criticized. You know, that's why they had to form Celtic Frost. You know, that's a huge part of why I think To Mega Therion is so good, is because everyone insulted them for Hellhammer. They were ridiculed, you know, made to feel minuscule by a bunch of people they'd never met, you know, from countries they hadn't seen yet at that point. And I don't know, maybe they needed that kind of veneer after a while, that they ran out of ideas and they didn't want to be ridiculed, so they tried to, you know, conform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you know, when you listen to like that demo Prototype, which is a terrible demo. It's 45 minutes. There's a Helter Skelter cover by the Beatles. There's some bunch of random songs. And then there's Hip Hop Jugend, which is just hilarious. But, yeah, but this is a band that had like, at this point, there's like no sincerity in their music left.
A lot to talk about here. This whole arch as a cautionary tale for one, and the issue of sincerity, which is such a nebulous topic in metal, right, or in any art.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I mean, why would Celtic Frost cover fucking David Bowie's Heroes? You know, it just does not make sense at this point.
And the thing is that it's not only authenticity in the regular sense. When it comes to art, it has to be there's there's also a sense of appropriateness, because maybe Tom G. Warrior really liked that David Bowie song. You know, maybe he genuinely adored it. But what is it doing in Celtic Frost?
Yeah.
Right? It's like having a sense of place. What about everything that happened between Vanity and Nemesis all the way to Monotheist? I didn't explore all of them. I just jumped right to the album.
Yeah,
I find it
it's meme music at this point. You know, it's done with kind of like typical cynicism and irony. You know, which
that's
is
very
something...
bad in... Yeah, cynicism actually has no place in metal music.
It doesn't.
I think it has its place in other kinds of art.
But you know, I love cynicism in a lot of the kind of West Coast hardcore. You know, a lot of those bands from like California and all that,
right?
Where there's so much irony, spitting at everyone. We don't care. We hate you. We hate ourselves. You know, I love that stuff in that style. But I don't think it has a place in metal, and especially not in a band that has always been so open as Celtic Frost.
Because genres have their like a soul, like a defined personality. It's not even a human personality. It's because human personalities have extreme facets within us, right? But genres are like archetypal. They have one face, one color or something. And as you say, in the punk branch of extreme music, there is a place for cynicism and for irony, and they're sincere about it. That's the thing. You can be ironic and be authentic about your cynicism, right? And then you have stuff like early Discharge, and the guys from the Cro-Mags, right? Yeah, they're...
I mean, look, even the title,
fantastic stuff.
The title for Discharge is ironic. Hear nothing, see nothing, say nothing. You know, it's like we're ignoring what's going on in the world.
Yet you're singing about it. Yeah. And it's a fantastic album. Amazing album. One of the best ever made. It's the same with the debut album by the Cro-Mags. It's an amazing album.
Yeah, Age of Quarrel.
So we fall into, then what is metal about? Why can't metal allow irony? And I think it's because it's about heroism and power drive, right? And it's exclusively about that. And if you're genuinely power driven and in touch with your wildest, really in touch with your wildest impulses, that is not ironic. You can't be ironic about it and be sincere about it at the same time.
Yeah. But then again, you know, as much, you know, we have been very aggressive to them, but then what a comeback Monotheist it was. Like, the fact that after all this, they come back with an album as good as this is just insane.
And I don't know if you had that impression, but when listening to Monotheist, I really, I kept thinking about Samael's Ceremony of Opposites.
Yes, definitely.
Very different, but somehow.
Well, both of them are from the, you know, German-speaking parts of Switzerland, and both have had a lot of experimentation.
Yeah, and very early Samael, it's a very dark, twisted kind of death black metal as well.
Yes.
that not many people know about. They have some fantastic, really underground stuff there.
Definitely.
The Monotheist is a very long album.
Yeah, it's because it has the one song, Synagoga Satana, which is like 14 minutes, which inflates the album. But I think it honestly, had this album been about 30 to 40 minutes, it would be considered a classic today.
Overextended.
Yeah, definitely.
You notice, let me see, 5 minutes, 18, 17. By the time you reach Ayin Elohim, this is already a full length. The 8th track.
Yes.
Because the songs are longish, from 3 to 5 to 7 minutes. So by the 8th track, my first and second experience of going through this album is I was tired by the time I was on Ayin Elohim.
Mm-hmm. But yeah,
and
your review was actually really perfect, because the thing that doesn't make sense on this album, which really annoys me with it, is that it goes, very intense, very heavy, soft, experimental, back to heavy. It does not really make sense.
And it's not that they cannot go back and forth from this, but it has to make sense, right? And they have to consider, there has to have a rhythm within which you consider the reaction of the listener.
Yeah.
And they do it by considering their own reaction. So they should have sat down and actually paid attention to how they felt with all this long atmospheric parts. And they have this thing within the songs where they have heavy guitar riffs and then complete silence with some atmospheric noodling, with no transition whatsoever.
But it just works. You take the song Domain of Decay, right? Like, have you listened to that intro? If you notice, I'm not joking, it sounds like a suffocation intro, kind of thing. Like, very precise, very fast, very chuggy, deep, and everything. And the way it just kind of almost suddenly smooths out is really interesting, I think, on this song.
Idea-wise,
yeah,
concept-wise, I really like what they were trying to do with this album, and the raw sounds they were using for it too, both for the metal part, and which is extremely polished, and I don't know who they were using but this is top-notch production too. It's incredible.
They had a team, like not even, it was not one person. Literally, you have, Tom G. Warrior was working as the executive producer, like, so he was the top dog in many ways, but they had an entire absolute team. Martin Eric Ain was very important, but they had all kinds of people. They even had a team of assistants and everything, and another executive producer on top. And obviously Peter Tagtrend from Hypocrisy was producing the album as well. So it's pretty impressive, everyone that came together to make this work sound-wise.
Right. Yeah, it sounds very good, and the ideas themselves. It's an incredibly dark album, and it's much more darker than To Mega Therion. To Mega Therion is very mythic, as you would mention the Conan references, the Robert E. Howard references, and it works really well. That's the perfect metal album in many ways, and this tries to go further than that, and it also makes it more modern, more futuristic. The titles are more esoteric, and they are also violent in a way.
It touches a lot. There's a lot of Kabbalah stuff. The Synagoga, Satana, Elohim, which means, God of gods. Even in the lyrics, there's some references, to the way
it has
angels work and everything.
I don't know what language? And the fifth track, for example, Otabismi, the
Hebrew.
it's
Dath,
Hebrew.
yeah, Dath means knowledge. Like that, I've seen that
Yeah,
word so many times in many metal albums.
yeah, and it's the hidden sphere in the abyss of the tree of life, right?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
literally, it's there. Yeah, so
Yeah, so I haven't explored this album lyrically, but I'm pretty sure it's wow.
yeah, I mean, I don't understand why Kabbalah is so fascinating to so many metal bands. It's just I never understood that. I'm not saying it's not
Because
fascinating, but I'm just saying there are so many other, belief systems that work just as well as Kabbalah.
I think it's because it has a lot of things to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain this. It gives you upfront, it gives you a very clear organization of a lot of concepts. Because as you know, the Kabbalah actually comes from ideas from Islamic mysticism and Greco-Roman mysticism.
Yeah.
That's where the Kabbalah actually comes from. And basically the Jewish mystics kind of just organized it all better and made it more complicated.
Yeah.
Actually, so I think that makes it like these guys, most metal people in metal bands, they're not practicing mystics, they're not academics either. They just want to grab onto something that's cool and easy. And I think Kabbalah is just it gives a lot to play with. That's my impression.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know, but here he seems kind of sincere because you see a lot of the kind
Right.
of lyrically, because obviously I spent a lot of time with this album because there was so much to digest here. And I think he does believe in gnosis. Like I get the impression that he's trying to achieve gnosis in a lot of these songs. Because you have a lot of mystic what do you call notions. One, he's the idea of eradicating the self, the ego, to be closer to to achieve gnosis, to be closer to God, technically. A lot of stuff like that. It's not as well worded as To Mega Therion, but it's just, I don't know, it just seems very sincere, and he's having quite a bit of fun with the imagery.
Well, it's more difficult to put it into concrete words when you're talking about this um, abstract concepts that made it into flesh. For instance, you have the fourth track, Drown in Ashes, and he tries to make it about his body. He connects it with the kind of a general feeling of darkness and physical sensations of pain. So far that's good, but as you say, the images will not be as clear and as adventurous as To Mega Therion.
Yeah. And honestly, I think it's still a successful attempt at conveying mysticism in metal. And like I've said quite a few times on these videos, it's something that really annoys me when bands try to touch these themes and just fucking make an absolute mockery of them. Not even make a mockery of them, make a mockery of themselves, and just come up with like the stupidest lyrics ever because they don't understand anything.
Yeah, I think if you don't know this stuff, I mean, if you live it also, but I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of posturing in metal. There's a lot of I'm guessing it's because a lot of it comes from an insincere place.
Yeah.
Just circus most of the time. Thinking about any particular example with this terrible lyrics or terrible music paired with Kabbalistic references.
Oosh. Bro, was it? I think Disincarnate tried it on Dreams of the Carrion Kind, I think at times, and I was kind of like laughing, and I don't know, man. There's so many bands that have done it, but like it's always been the kind of C D tier 90s bands that really make a mockery, or some of the newer ones, but I don't have any examples that come to mind because I try to concentrate on the good and what I like, rather than just sitting there and going through, oh, what were these guys trying to say? I'm like,
yeah. That's Yeah,
You know what I mean?
it's yeah, it's
Yeah.
there's only so much time you have, and really, it's
You know,
sometimes when we like spending too much time criticizing cherry orchards or whatever here when you can be listening
exactly.
to Mega Therion, right?
We've done this in the past. Those who know will know. But now it's time to move on to better things. But I've got there's actually a few moments on this album that are absolutely gorgeous. I'm thinking of Obscured, right? Which is the sixth song here. So at first it starts out this really subdued, very kind of calm double guitar harmony. And then it goes to the verse where Tom G. Warrior's singing. Like, his singing on this album is genuinely good. Like, he's not trying to go outside of his comfort zone, but I think he's a decent singer. He's someone who could carry a tune here. It's not Cherry Orchard or whatever. But he's doing well, and then he's very good at I don't know who, maybe the producers, because there's a whole team, but they got a lot of female vocals here. And the interaction between his voice and the female vocals, very interesting. It has a Beauty and the Beast effect. It's not like childish like Cradle of Filth. We have like comical kind of shrieks with over the top operatic vocals. Here it just seems really genuine. The interplay between Tom G. Warrior's experimentation with his voice and other real singers, right? Because that's what he got to help him. I think it's just very interesting. He's like, the parts of this album that stray away from metal, some of them are just fantastic and really ranking some of the top moments of their discography, just because I think he's got a genuine love and understanding for kind of weird music. And that's not, and I think maybe sure, metal is where his heart was at a time, but when he was making this, he had so many ideas that escaped metal, and they were really good. Like, this is where he found himself in many ways.
I like the collection of things you just said, especially the fact at the center of it, which is that he does not go outside of his natural range.
Yeah.
And if you notice very well, Monotheist is actually a lot more mainstream than To Mega Therion. To Mega Therion is more, people keep commenting on Monotheist videos that this is the heaviest shit, right, ever made, because it sounds really loud, but it's the collection of everything that's happening here. It's more mainstream. Even the heavy parts, even the everything it fits within. I mean, I can imagine this album besides the polished. What's this? There's a Tool, Tool, right?
Yeah.
I can imagine this sitting beside one of those albums. I'm not saying it has the same math-oriented thing, but the general sound, it doesn't scare away the mainstream listener, the guy who will also have Disturbed CDs on his shelf. But I can't imagine a Disturbed listener. I mean, a listener of Disturbed and Tool also having To Mega Therion in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it works because I think he's very good here at the riffing. While the non-metal parts really make this album stand out, the riffs here are still very good. He's kind of expanded a bit more outside of his kind of comfort zone on the guitar neck. He's not just going up and down. There's quite a bit more going on. He's a bit better at using tension at some parts. So that's why those riffs work really well, because they're repeated so long, but they don't become boring. Because the riff ends in the way that, like, when it begs to go back to the root note. So there's kind of like tension, satisfaction, that kind of goes around, and everything. It's well done. Maybe, of course, I do think that the way that some of these songs are structured, a lot more could have been cut down.
Yes.
But you know what? I really like here? The sound design. Because you have all these sound samples, but they're not not superfluous. Listen to the main riff of Abyss Me Vel Daft. There are some horns at the same time as the guitar, and the horns aren't just there, as a background noise. No, they're absolutely wonderful. and they really complement the riff perfectly.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think this is the only sad thing is that they never took this and imposed better order and structure. Because if they had done that, oh my God, they would have been crowned by the anus people, by the, you know.
Oh, God damn
It's
it.
true.
Those crazy lunatics. Yeah.
It's true. As you say, the sound design is marvelous. The ideas are all there, but it goes on too long sometimes, and the flow of the album is not right.
Yeah.
And it's tired to listen to this album, but it also has some of the deepest emotions and widest. I mean, if I can, I really like to connect emotionally to albums. I mean, that's why I feel like that's the best way to actually explore them. And I don't know about you, but this album really made me feel like it was like that, like what they were building was like a real universe.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this
real
was
universe.
HR Giga's stuff coming to life.
And the previous song, right now you were talking about the horns in Os Abysmi Verdad, and before you mentioned Obscure, right?
Mm.
And those clean parts where he's saying no, 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 right?
Yeah.
I think that's the chorus. And this is the part that comes to mind, but throughout the whole album, I feel there's a very heavy and unsettling sadness. Terrible, terrible sadness in this album. And it's very desolate. Sometimes it feels liberating, and sometimes it feels terribly lonely. I don't know if I mentioned that in the review I wrote recently, but it feels terribly lonely. I don't know what you get from this album. But I'm not even talking lyrically. I'm saying just the music. I mean, what world does it create for you?
A desolate world, like very insane place where he's just trying to fight and it's just proving impossible, destined for failure. What were the lyrics on some of the lyrics on here? My soul is dragged, my soul is bound, and so it fades.
Right. And you mentioned the Kabbalistic thing, which is in your face, the references, but it's not the, let's say, white Kabbalism. This is Satanism. That's why he talks about Synagoga Satanae and Totengott, which is death god, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't speak German, but it sounds like death god.
Yeah, the god of death. That's what I think
God
he was
death,
trying
right?
maybe he meant. Yeah.
Domain of decay. This is like the what's the night side tree, whatever they want to call it. And the fact that the only sphere of the Kabbalistic tree they reference is Dath, sunk in the abyss. Yeah, this is the dark stuff.
All right.
And some of the most inspired, right?
By definitely.
Tom G. Warrior.
I think we could go on like for another 2 hours on this album. But I think honestly, if I was to say anything, I think it's a hell of a fucking comeback, and it's a shame. It could have been a classic. It really could have.
I think maybe sometime in the future we can do an in-depth dive into this album. It really deserves it, I think.
It's very interesting. I didn't realize to what extent this album has so many hidden facets to it. All right, so final thoughts on Celtic Frost's discography?
You find death metal and black metal, many of its important sounds and stylings, right? And then they abandoned it. They disbanded, basically, and came back with this statement in Monotheist. And then they kind of disappeared again into Crypticon. So it's like Celtic Frost was like a lightning for metal music. Mhm.
Literally, I think that's it. I think, what they did in such a short period of time, from like 84 to 87 was just insane. And, they are such a household name now in metal that you recognize their influence immediately. And then, much later on in their career to come back with something like Monotheist it's just an
Right.
insane band.
Right.
I think, we've said quite enough about them. So, if everyone who's watching this at this point, go back to the articles. There's quite a few. We have the Hellhammer video, and I think we've said quite a lot about this band. And, all that's left to say is to really just listen to the music and enjoy it.
See you guys next
All right,
time.
thanks. See you. Bye.